Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's Mark from Powersonic and Apprentice 121. Today we are installing another Givenergy all-in-one system alongside an existing PV array, as you can see on the roof behind me there. This is a customer who has one of the very early feed-in tariff setups and they do not want to be losing that. So we're going to add a Givenergy all-in-one and gateway to try and harness some of that excess energy but allow the customer to maintain their payments for the generation and see how all of this comes together. On this one, the gateway is going to be remote from the AIO near the intake, so we've not shared that on the channel so far, so it's going to be interesting to see how all of that comes together. We're going to talk about the all-in-one in itself and explain a little bit about how that works and show the setup from start to finish. Let's get straight to it. So you can see up on the roof there we have got a 3.4 kilowatt array, and that is generating lots of usable electricity for the house, but the customer was noticing there was quite a bit of export taking place and they wanted to harness that energy to hopefully help power their heat pump and also their EV charge point. So we were tasked with installing an all-in-one unit and a gateway, and I'll show you the setup we've got. Best place to start is down at the house. So this is the customer's original setup. This PV board here was powered from the consumer unit. We've not interfered with any of that aside from bringing our AIO cable, the gateway cable, which is just the other side of this wall, through into this board to power it. That then feeds power off to the inverter itself and equally takes that power back out to the gateway. The Solic here is looking after any excess generation to run an immersion heater that's on the water tank. Now that was CT measured for any export over in this consumer unit. We've had to move that out to the gateway obviously because now the gateway is kind of controlling the consumption of the installation, so any solar generation runs off to the gateway, does its magic with the house loads and the battery storage, and then any excess would go to the grid from there. You wouldn't really see it at the consumer unit as such. You'd see it at the grid connection in the gateway. The consumer unit would just be drawing power for itself through the meter tails from the gateway itself. There's no real interaction with the solar in there anymore. So we've had to reposition that, and the process is now that the generation will run the house loads first, then fill the battery up, and then after that it will do the water tank element. I don't expect that that's actually going to do a great deal, to be honest, based on the size of the solar array and the consumer's consumption. The battery will store those 13 units up essentially every day, and equally there's the heat pump, the EV charger, all the rest of that stuff going on. I don't anticipate that this is actually going to do an awful lot, but it's there and ready to go should the needs be. And as I said, all of this stays the same. The feed-in tariff still stays the same. This meter still reads the same. We've just popped the power feeding into all of this from the gateway, so the all-in-one and Givenergy system can see what's going on in terms of PV generation, house loads and the battery, and share all of that with the customer in the app. So let's have a little look at the all-in-one itself. Now in this case we've popped it into a detached garage. This already houses an electric vehicle that's charged up overnight, so there was already stored energy in this location. It's out of the weather and elements, out of the harshest, coldest weather in winter, so we're not going to see too much of an impact in terms of temperature in the output performance of this in the colder months. And equally it doesn't get absolutely maffed in here, as you will find in loft spaces, which, as I've said before on my social media output, should be avoided with battery storage systems in my opinion. But down here we have got the all-in-one itself. This is basically split into two component parts. So there's the inverter in the top and the battery modules in the bottom. Now the battery modules are housed in briefcase type metal boxes. There's 4 of those in there, and then they have a metal cover plate that is bolted onto the front to house them in 2 kind of steel boxes within this AIO itself, to try and preserve elements of safety and make sure those batteries are really well protected and looked after in the product itself. In the top is the inverter, so that converts the AC energy that you may be using from the grid into DC power to fill your batteries up, and equally in the opposite direction to make use of that DC energy by converting it into usable AC power and sending it back to the home. So it works in 2 distinct ways. This doesn't accept PV inputs themselves. I've been asked that question on the channel a couple of times already. You need a separate inverter to convert the PV energy into usable power with the system at large. And this helps us with existing installations with solar PV as we've got on this install, because generally the customers don't want to be interfering with that original installation, because it's really difficult to maintain and keep hold of the feed-in tariff payments they would have received at that time. So this is a way of ensuring that you're not interfering with any of that, you're not upgrading or changing the inverter, we're not touching the solar panels. As I'll show you on this video, the existing base solar installation is staying as is, and we're just incorporating it into this new Givenergy all-in-one solution. Let's have a look at this installation at large and see exactly what is at play, and get to looking at the gateway and some of the other products involved in making all of this magic work. So you can see over in the corner there we've got an old Rolex EV charge point that's currently on test at the moment, and we have wired that back up through the top of this garage, and then it drops down into this main isolation point inside the garage door. Now, as I explained, this is here for safety purposes, that anyone coming through this garage door who needs to isolate the electric vehicle and the battery storage from one simple isolator is here. So we've put the dual supply isolate at the Givenergy gateway here, so this has got a feed from the gateway direct to the EV charger, and then also from the gateway direct to the AIO. But a simple point of isolation for somebody in an emergency scenario is to come in and just quickly turn that off, and it kills the power to everything. You can see we still need to connect our earth rod in. We'll have a look at that outside in a minute. These two LSF cables from the top, one is going to the all-in-one, one is going to the EV charge point. At the side of the all-in-one, we do still have an isolator for maintenance purposes, and the EV charger has an isolator as well. So they can be worked on individually, but we thought it made sense to have an isolation point here just in case somebody needs to make a rapid isolation in the very worst circumstances. And rather than an emergency stop button that could get knocked or something, this is the solution we've gone through it for. Let me know what you think in the comments, if that's a good idea or not. For us, it makes a lot of sense. So just outside here you can see where our cable exits the ground and leading into the garage, where the all-in-one is, just in that corner there. And we're waiting to drive our earth rod in. Now you need that for when you're going to islanding mode, if you do, to have a reference to earth on the system. We're going to set this up so it's in parallel with the existing earthing arrangement rather than switched over separately, so it can still be made use of during normal operation as well. But if the DNO has an issue out on the network, there is always a reference point to earth on our system thanks to that. We've got that cleated up down there. The run through the garden is quite a tricky one through all of these shrubs and bushes. The guys had a big job digging all this out. I'll be honest, there was lots of roots in there. They've done a cracking job. I got this to the required depth. You can see there's overlay tape in there, just waiting to backfill this last little bit. Once the earth rod is in, it's around 17 metres from start to finish, and we've had to go under a little paver just right down at the origin of the trench over there. It wasn't fun, but it's in now, and it's replaced what was just a very small cable running down to this garage, powering the existing EV charge point over there. It wasn't really of suitable size, and the customer was having the overcurrent protected device in the consumer units located in the meter cabinet operating fairly regularly while they had their vehicle on charge. So we're just making sure that there isn't an issue with their installation or the charge point itself through the course of testing. So I've run through the test with the TIS gear as always, but I've just put my van on charge for 5 or 10 minutes on max draw to see if there is any issue with that. I wasn't sure if the Rolex was introducing the problem. My own view is that the overcurrent protected device that's in the meter cabinet was just consistently at its maximum rating for a long time, and it's just worn itself out and is operating a little bit too sensitively as a result, and causing some of that what we would term nuisance operation. But we will see. I'll show you down at the other end. That's the trench back to the garage. You can see it runs along here. This slab had already been lifted for the original supply the EV installers had fitted, so it was already broken in this corner. We've not done that, but we're going to try and put it back as neat as we possibly can. You can see there's the heat pump here. The heat pump guys have done all their work, and Matty and Nathan are now just fishing through the cable for the PV into the consumer unit in the house that we can then connect into the gateway. So we've got existing meter cabinet here. We'll have a look inside there and show you the consumer unit and have a look at the gateway itself. Our cable route is just along the bottom here. Again, we've tracked the route that the EV installers had used with their cable, so we've just followed it and used the same fixing points with cleats again as they had done, just to try and match it in. This is a 5-core. So obviously we've got our line and neutral for the AIO, and we've also got our line and neutral for the EV charger, and we've taken a separate earth through as well, and it's 10mm in size. And again, the armours are earthed down at both ends, so we've got the steel wire armour as well, carrying as an earth path from A to B. So we've got ourselves some new work mats and branded bits of equipment to use on our installs. So this is for up on the roofs primarily. It's really difficult to do anything other than kneel down. If you're in the solar game, you will appreciate that. So knee pads and kneeling pads to try and help take some of the strain off those joints while we're up there doing that work. And these were provided by Stickers and that. Absolutely fantastic service, not paid or sponsored. They look the business. Sam from the podcast, Electricians Podcast, designed this logo for me a couple of years ago now. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, on the sticker up here, we're branding up all of the inverters and equipment as well, so people can see and recognise that it's us and get in touch. If a new homeowner or occupier moves in and they want some maintenance or other work carrying out, you're front and centre of that. And we have a scaffold banner as well, because we often get questions from neighbours while we're putting solar PV systems up. It looks very much like this, and I'll show you that when we are actually doing a solar install and we've got it up and in use. So the meter cabinet was set up like this already. You can see we've got a heat pump and EV board. This is the one that was a little bit sensitive. I think it's just been running close to its maximum rating and upset itself, so it's operating a little bit too keenly. It could also be impacted possibly by temperature, because it is in an essentially outside location. However, we don't need to be using that anymore. We've positioned the EV charge point into the gateway itself. The heat pumps obviously still run from there. So the tails now come out of the meter, they run over into the gateway and run into the grid input. You can see we're in bypass mode just for the moment. So those tails pop up into the grid terminals and then return off the load into the Henley blocks down here to power the EV charge point consumer unit and also the consumer unit in the house. Over the back of here, the tails run behind the gateway itself. There's these little feet that give a void behind there to do that, and there is 3 entries at the back of here that you can use. We've taken the stuffing glands that come in there and put them into the bottom of the gateway, and then reuse these internal to the gateway itself, so in the reverse with this bit on the inside to give us a weather seal into here, so we can come rear entry nicely off the wall, keep all of those cables offshore without needing to use any trunking, because it was a little bit difficult with this wall space under here to do anything else. The PV and heat pump circuits were already set up like this. We've just popped a little length in so we can power the PV from the gateway and just monitoring it within the Givenergy all-in-one system. It's not going to interact with it at all or do anything to it. It's just to see what's going on in terms of PV generation. And yeah, the meter guys have done us a solid over in here by getting us connected in with the tails, and we can make the best of this. We'll give it a clean out and a wipe out as we always do, but it's a busy space just because of the number of cables coming into here with this consumer unit for the heat pump as well. We've then got our cable which runs out from the gateway to do the EV charge point and also the AIO. The customer is going to have Givenergy EV charge point in the garage at some stage, so that is all set up and ready to go on that front. Now, as we've said, that is now dual supply essentially. We've got our 5 cores in there, but they can all still be isolated from the gateway, and as long as we apply appropriate labelling, I am happy with that. I didn't see the point of having separate cables strung along this wall. It doesn't look as nice, and it doesn't really change the electrical installation more widely. Because of it, we just need to be aware of the isolation requirements on that cable at each end, which is why we've gone for the switches we have in the garage, so all of the energy can be isolated in one point as it enters into it. And the same down here at the gateway, isolations can be made to kill the power out to it as well. So this is the existing conduit that leads up to the loft for the heat pump circuit and also the PV. And we've just tapped into that for our gateway down here, which we're just in the process of commissioning. Nathan's doing a bit of a tidy up for us, and just to walk the route for you, you can see we've got our cable running off and away down the garden. Matt is just on with the earth rod down at the garage, which is over here. So you can see he's got his earth rod ready to go. We're just going to drive it in and put a little earth pit in down in that corner. It's all wired up inside and ready to go. I'm running through the commission, which is on the laptop. Once we've got that done and the system working, we'll jump back and close this one up. So you can see we're on with another commission now. We've got it running through. The gateway came up to date already. The AIO is just doing its thing. So we've made a little Wi-Fi network down here. The customer already had some Hikvision cameras and such wired in. So we've just made some small modifications to that. The AIO is doing its update. You can see here it'll restart and configure itself, and to give it 10 minutes, which is a new instruction. It hasn't said that on the last few commissions, so that's an interesting change. You can hear now it's shut itself down. It'll do this beep turn because it's lost communication with the gateway, and it's doing its whatever it is it's doing. The beep will eventually stop. For those of you who watched the earlier videos, you'll have seen this. This confused me at the first outset because I thought there was actually a fault or something going on with the software update, and we ended up shutting some of these down mid-update because of that. But that was just our learning experience for us, and you're supposed to just wait. So if you are an installer and they start beeping at you when you're going through the commission and update stage, it is normal. Just let it do its thing. Eventually it shuts down, and then it starts to reload its software into itself and reboot back up. It's all part of the actual process. So you can see here again, we've got our gateway. As I said, this just runs through the system. You put all your PV strings in, you put all of the information in various inverters. So if you've got more than this and there's other bits and pieces going on, if it's a hybrid inverter, whatever it is. And while it's running through this process, we can gather our pictures, because you need a picture of the gateway and the metering, you need a picture of the AC isolator feeding into the all-in-one itself, and a picture of the wider installation as well to upload once it gets towards the end of the commissioning process. And you can see now it's done whatever it is doing while it's beeping, and now it's rebooting itself and loading the software in. While this green light's blinking, it's doing stuff. So software updating, it goes green and red, I think, while it's loading information in. They all mean certain bits and pieces, but essentially we're waiting for that to go a solid green and for this to tell us it's finished the commission. So while we're waiting for this system to commission, I just thought I would thank all of those people who've recently subscribed to the channel. It's brilliant to see the numbers growing on a daily basis, and it really does help with the revenue we make from YouTube, and that helps impact into Apprentice 121. But one of the things I've noticed is lots of people come and watch this content who aren't subscribers. So if you are enjoying it and getting some value from it, I share loads of stuff with varying solar systems, EV chargers and wider electrical discussions. Please do hit the subscribe button, click the bell, and watch out for the next drops coming along the way. And just to look at the Rolex charger, you can see what I mean. It's got this protective device in here. It's actually rated at a C40. So if you remember down at the origin to this, there was that 32 amp breaker that I just think was getting a little bit upset with the current running through it consistently, and it had made it slightly too sensitive, or it wasn't very happy living in the meter cabinet being only a 60898 product. So that is now powered and run from the gateway, and as I said, this eventually will be updated to a Givenergy variant, and it's already wired back into there to function through the gateway as intended. And as we said here at the main intake to the garage area, we've got this dual supply isolator, which if there was ever a problem with the car or the battery and an emergency scenario, somebody can isolate and kill the power to everything in here. Equally, if they're a bit unsure doing some maintenance and they want the power off to everything, you can do that through this one isolation point, and then there is no prospect of any energy working its way between components. Not that it essentially could from this location, but even so, the function is there. If you kill this AC isolator, obviously with the all-in-one itself, there can be no transfer of energy through it because that is isolated, and equally over at the charge point too, if the RCBO that's built into the top of it there is isolated the same, so somebody can still have access to that. And if you want to isolate from down at the gateway itself, you can do that. That's down the other end of the garden through this door, as we've shown before over in that direction. So you can see the guys have popped as a little electrode in there. We've backfilled all the soil, so we've got we put a 16mm tail on it. You don't have to go so large for your earth rods, but it's just a bit of mechanical protection to the cable, rather than just stringing a 2.5 underground. You'd have to use Copex and such. This goes into the earth pit, if you like, through a bit of conduit box, and it's all protected in the ground, nice and close to the wall. Got a good value off it, and our supply cable pops out the ground there alongside it as well. So a nice neat job. Anyone who needs to come and test it or do maintenance on it, it's marked, you can find it. All good. We're just going to pop a bit of seal around where the cable penetrates through the brick there, and otherwise we are done at that end. So the earth obviously comes down. There's a separate earth in this steel wire arm which is coming down here. We've got our earth cable here which is just waiting to connect into that, so that's going to the rod, just waiting to pop that in once we finish the commission, and then we can hand this over to the customer, hopefully all been well. And yeah, so that'll all tie together. Obviously the armours are earth both ends. We've got the earth for all of the equipment connected inside here as well, and then the earth for the rod ties into it and just runs in parallel with the earthing arrangement for the installation at large. So we're nearly there now. It's up to 90% and it's just doing the last battery module. I think you'll see down here, I forgot to mention, we've brought a couple of data cables down. One is for the internet and one is for any CT measurement that may be required. We've actually got the RS485 link between here and the gateway, but if the charge point ever needs a CT, we've got that down here in that cat cable, and there's a spare one in there for the data connection should we ever need to use it. It made sense when I've got the trench open to go for extra capacity on everything. It wasn't really an extra expense, and it's in there ready to use if it's ever needed. So while we're waiting for this to commission, I thought we'd speak about its location. And as you can see on the side of here, it is rated to -20 and +50. The all-in-one is -10 +50, and that is due to the performance of the batteries when they're in an external environment. These overcurrent protective devices are all product standard 60947-2, which are pollution degree category 3 or 4 depending on the manufacturers you choose. This is a weather sealed enclosure, as you can see, and it is a lockable front door that no one can really gain access to without the use of this super duper key here. So I'm happy to put this in an external environment. The manufacturer has applied all of the derating factors due to temperature within that range, and also the weather aspect in terms of moisture ingress, hence the specific glands that come with this box, both for mounting into the rear and the bottom. And again, if you were using a normal consumer unit, as I've shared on the channel before, so a external EV consumer unit, for example, that has 60898 MCBs or RCBOs made to the same product standard for the bimetallic part of that device, then you need to factor in the derating of all of that based upon the product standard and the connected loads. That might result in being absolutely fine without needing to do anything in addition. Otherwise, you might want to consider putting it in an external enclosure such as a GRP enclosure, as I've demonstrated before, with heating and cooling built in to try and keep it at a stable set temperature. So there are some caveats to it, and again, with any kind of basic consumer unit, I'd be very wary using them outside because they don't tend to have the lockable front covers, and they do tend to let moisture in quite easily because of that. Rather than being the sealed door here, the flaps just lift up and down and can be left in the open position quite easily by people knocking it with a bin, or a child who might interfere with it just from being nosy, as I would do. And that is the key difference between using this and using one of those. This isn't a setup that we're going to be doing on a consistent basis. We've done it here because really we had very little option of getting this inside. There's just no space for it. So we've gone for this approach on this install. Complies with all of the regulations. It's perfectly safe and serviceable to be here. And yeah, I just thought I'd mention that while we're running through the course of this install, the reason we've selected it and the manufacturer specific instructions related to this product as an assembly in itself. So I realised through the course of this video we haven't shared a great deal of information about the Givenergy gateway and all-in-one. I've shared a couple of videos on the channel already about that and gone into detail on the tech spec and how it all works, but as a very brief summary, if you're a consumer watching this and wondering exactly what it can offer, the battery is 13.5 kilowatt hours in size, which means it can store up, roughly speaking, 13 units of energy. And the gateway allows the link up of all of the different sources of power and how they can be utilised in your home. So if it's sunny and the inverter's generating usable electricity, that can be used in conjunction with the stored energy in the batteries to sustain your house loads. If the house loads are not present or are satisfied, any excess energy from the solar array can be directed to the battery as well. And at times when the grid is maybe lost, you have that 6 kilowatt output from the battery that can run your house loads. And if it's also sunny at the same time, the PV generation can be in addition to that to help keep your house running, and also possibly top the battery up if there is enough generation and the demand isn't hitting that 6 kilowatt discharge from the battery system. So it gives you flexibility beyond most other products on the market. It truly does enable you to go off grid in those worst circumstances for a prolonged period of time, whereas other inverters of the hybrid variety are often limited to that maximum output and they lose the PV generation during those off-grid times as well, generally speaking. So I hope that explains a little bit about the products. I will drop a link in alongside this video to the Givenergy website, and if you want to dig through some of my prior videos for the all-in-one, there is a solar playlist which shows that and some of the other manufacturers' options that we've covered as well. Back to site. We are now all functioning and working. This is another Givenergy system online, ready for the customer to use and interact with through the app. It's tied into their existing solar PV array. We've not had to interfere with any of that whatsoever, and now any excess generation can be stored in this battery. After that point, they can make use of their existing water heating element, and after that any extra can go out to the grid. So I think it's come up really well. We've made a lot of effort to keep this as neat and tidy as possible and keep our cable routes looking nice and tidy. We've brought cables down here that we think are future proofing in terms of what might happen with battery storage and increased size of inverters maybe down the line, utilising a 10mm steel wire armour when we could have perhaps got away with a 4 or a 6. And equally with the EV charger as well, we've taken that same approach just to bring that capacity down here if ever the situation arose where it was needed. It made sense for the extra cost for 17 metres of cable to do that while we're digging the garden up in what is a very difficult route. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you've got any questions around the wider install that we've done here today, please drop them in the comments. If you're a consumer and you're thinking of getting one of these systems installed into your home, please see a link in the description to head over to our website and fill in an inquiry form. It'd be great to put a proposal forward for your particular installation. We're really enjoying doing these. We relish the more difficult and complex installations that perhaps other contractors are scared away from. So if you've got one of those, please do get in touch. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.